Awesome. I think we're ready to start. So thank you everyone for coming, both in person and those of you who are online. My name is Peter Cohen. I'm going to be moderating this debate. Here we have Jennifer French and Granville Anderson. Thank you both very much for attending. Unfortunately, Chris Borgia had a last-minute scheduling conflict, and so he will not be attending tonight. So I'd like to start today with a quick land acknowledgement and a quick framing statement before we go on to the format of the debate. So Indigenous peoples have been stewards of this land since time immemorial. They were and are the original environmentalists, currently protecting 80% of the Earth's biodiversity, despite making up only 5% of the global population. Today, we stand on the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Huron-Wendat, and the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. This territory is covered by the Upper Canada Treaties and the Williams Treaty of 1923, which was ostensibly meant to protect the land of First Nations from encroaching colonizers, but instead only contributed to their exploitation. In many of these treaties, the Indigenous peoples received only one-time payments and inadequate reserve land, or no reserve land at all. The treaties shortchanged the First Nations and limited their ability to prosper. Our communities and our country as a whole have a history of benefiting from unfair policies and treaties at the expense of First Nations, treaties which we have often failed to even uphold. For centuries, treaties have been broken for the sake of unsustainable resource exploitation, and the presence of extraction projects near Indigenous communities often correlates with an uptick in violence against Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people. This shows the clear link between environmental degradation and the marginalization of Indigenous people. Now, this land acknowledgement is meant to recognize the history of this land and our current situation, but it's also a declaration of our intent to seek justice for and reconciliation with Métis, Inuit, and First Nations. Now, tonight we're here because of the climate crisis. We've watched as extreme weather events have gotten more frequent and more intense, as more people are made vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, and as we hurtle closer to the edge of climate disaster. Our best bet is to limit warming to 1.5 degree increase in the global average temperature. This would mean fewer climate disasters and fewer people harmed. Most importantly, it would mean a significantly lower chance of risk of triggering feedback loops, which would cause natural systems to release greenhouse gases even without human interference. The nations of the world committed to a 1.5 degrees. Our leaders at the national level made promises, ratifying the Paris Accords, while leaders at the local and provincial level affirmed the Accords principles that to keep us safe, it's imperative to limit warming as much as possible. Our best bet is still to limit warming to a 1.5 degrees Celsius increase. The latest IPCC report says that this is still possible, but that goal becomes more unlikely every day. To be blunt, 1.5 is dying. It's on life support, and our current way of doing things is what put it there. Our incremental, tiny reforms to our way of life are like putting a Band-Aid on internal bleeding. The good news is that this is not the end. 1.5 is still possible if we act now. And even if we go over 1.5, we'd still be able to reduce harm, because every fraction of a degree of warming that we avoid translates to fewer people displaced, fewer extreme weather events, fewer species and habitats lost forever. That's the good news. The bad news is that this means that we've got a lot of work ahead of us. It's not the time to throw up our hands and give up, nor is it the time to continue along with business as usual. It's time to redouble our efforts, because every fraction of a degree counts. This is why we're here today. We don't want to continue along this path. We want to minimize harm. We want to minimize human suffering and ecological destructions. We want Canada and Ontario to shape up its act. We're here tonight to see how our parties plan to do that. Now, our format will be like this. I have 5 questions that I'll ask each candidate, with topics ranging from emission reduction to a just transition to climate and COVID. For each question, you will have 2 minutes to respond. If you bump up against the time limit, our timekeeper, Alyssa, will give you a warning. When you have 15 seconds left, she'll hold up a yellow card. When you're out of time, she'll hold up a pink one. You'll also have the opportunity to respond to another candidate's answer with a 1-minute time limit. However, we ask that you limit the amount of responses that you give, because this is a debate, and we're trying to get to as many questions as we can. After we get through the 5 questions we prepared, we'll turn it over to audience questions, where you'll have the same time limits. Does it sound good? Can I see a thumbs up? Cool. Thank you very much. To our in-person audience, we'll have a mic for the Q&A section, but if you're not comfortable with going up to the mic, we have pieces of paper, which our members will provide, that you can write your questions on and hand them to one of our members. Please try to keep your writing neat, and also keep in mind that I cannot read cursive. I'm a Gen Zer, you know. To our audience watching online, you can submit your questions to the YouTube live stream chat, or send them alternatively to our email, which is climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. Again, that is climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. Please include the words climate justice debate Durham or Oshawa in the subject line to make it easier for us to find. Okay, without further ado, I'll move on to the first question. So either of you can choose to answer first, but our first question is, what is your party's climate platform, and what greenhouse gas reduction targets does your party have for 2030 and 2050? And how will you ensure that your platforms are implemented and targets are met?
Do you want to pick a favorite, Peter, or will we?
I'm going to stand back.
Okay. Well, thank you for the question. And before I begin, I know that you already gave a land acknowledgement, but I would like to further acknowledge the land that we're on, but also an actual commitment to meaningful reconciliation, because especially as we are talking about climate justice, we have to more than acknowledge, but also plan to work together for all of the generations to come. And so with that in mind, the NDP has, I would say, a very clear and bold and achievable plan that is rooted in social justice, that is aiming to have that frame of reconciliation and encounter a lot of the damage that has been done, but also safeguard against a strong future. So you had asked about greenhouse gas reduction targets. Our commitment is to reduce emissions by at least 50% by 2030, and to achieve net zero no later than 2050. And that's in line with the most ambitious targets that are set out by the Paris Climate Accords. And Peter, as you had talked about with that 1.5 degree, we've got a lot of work ahead of us. And so our plan is the Green New Democratic Deal, and I'm happy to share that with folks. You can find it online to take a look at a lot of the specifics, and it does get into the specifics, but the broad strokes are that we will hold large polluters to account, to get Ontario to net zero emissions, making sure that regular Ontarians aren't unfairly targeted by the shift to cleaner forms of energy. We have a lot of specific approaches to that, but all within the same frame of not leaving anyone behind. There has been so much damage done, environmental racism, that we've got to work with all persons, all parties, and all partners to move forward. So I'm happy to get into the specifics as we go.
Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson?
Thank you very much. And before I begin, I would like to thank the Climate Justice of Durham for being here and for putting this together. This is a very important topic, and I am very pleased to see the attendance and see folks come out tonight. I wish it was a larger crowd here, because as I reiterated, this is highly important to all of us, not just to young people, but to your generation and the next generation to come. So as a party and personally, I will do my best to make sure we have climate changes observed and make sure we bring down the emissions. I don't know if, Jennifer, did you steal that from us, that we would reduce by 50% by 2030 and zero emissions by 2050? But we're going to try to surpass that and to do better than that. And we have to do that, and as a province, we can do better. And when we were in government, we have done a lot, maybe not enough, and we need to do more, like the Green Belt. We brought that in. That's world-renowned. We got rid of coal-fired plants, as you know. That has reduced a lot of pollutions in this province. and we will continue to do that. And what you did ask what we are doing now, it's not a gimmick, folks, that you've $1 per ride for public transit. Doesn't matter what type of transportation you take. That takes 400,000 cars off the road. So that serves that's allow people to travel using public transit, and it also put money in the pockets of ordinary citizens. But most importantly, it does take cars off the road and reduce pollution.
Right. I think that's your time. Thank you. If there are no direct responses, we can move on to the next question, which is this. The provincial government is responsible for the Ontario Building Code, Transportation Infrastructure, Electricity Generation, and the Places to Grow Act, which directs municipalities to create growth plans that will shape development in the decades to come. Now, all these areas provide significant opportunities to reduce emissions and pursue sustainability. How will your party take responsibility and seize those opportunities to help Ontario decarbonize and become a climate leader?
I guess I gotta go. Thank you for that question. That's a wonderful question. I, being a regional council, have seen what has happened when it comes to building. This current government MZOs has increased exponentially, more than any other government put together, combined in the history of this province. I know we need to build, we need to create jobs, but we have to do that in a fashion that's sustainable, in a fashion that's going to preserve the environment, and at the same time, we know there's a housing crisis. So we're going to encourage municipalities to intensify, and rather than building large lots, get rid of that, because we have to protect the green belt. And our government has planned to even expand the green belt. So those are steps we are taking to make sure that environmentally it's sustainable, and to make sure that we protect the air we breathe, and at the same time enhance the quality of life for every single Ontarian. So that's what we are working towards. But we can't do it alone. We need people to recycle and reduce waste. And as you know, we have an anaerobic digester that's coming in just down the road. It's not a bad thing. So when I oppose it at council, I don't oppose the concept. I oppose where it's going, because all of the environmental things, all the garbage seems to happen in Curtis. So that's I am saying put it someplace else. Let's spread the wealth throughout Durham region. So by doing that, by having an anaerobic digester, we are not filling the landfills. We are keeping methane gas out of landfills. So those are things we are currently doing and things we are pursuing as a government.
Thank you.
Municipality, of course, and that will transcend to provincial as well.
Ms. French?
Well, thank you. So the question is, how will we sort of take responsibility and use those opportunities?
Yes.
Well, it is absolutely, the right word is responsibility there, because we have a lot at stake, and a lot of folks, the health of our communities, children and neighbors, everybody deserves hope and a chance at a livable future. And the way that we're going, we're not going to have that if we don't work to ensure it. The Green New Democratic Deal does have a significant plan to help Ontarians transition away from fossil fuels towards zero emission sources like hydroelectric, wind, and solar. And that plan does, includes the phasing down gas-fired electricity to bring the electricity sector to net zero emissions by 2030. One of the worst things I've ever endured at my first term as an MPP was sitting across from a government that sold off Hydro One. But I digress. We have a responsibility to have that clean and responsible power. Under our Green New Democratic Deal, we also will invest $40 billion within our first term towards initiatives that include, improved transit, investments in retrofit and infrastructure, and having served as the transportation and highways and infrastructure critic for the party, it's awesome what we have laid out, not just with industry partners, but across, with municipalities and with environmental voices to put together a tremendous plan. Also, job training, placement, support for communities that have been adversely affected by climate change. We know also that conservation is a lot less expensive than costly new infrastructure, so ensuring that conservation first is a big part of that. And man, that 2 minutes goes by fast.
Oh, man. All right. You know what, since we only have 2 candidates, I think we can probably extend the 2-minute time limit to a 3-minute time limit. Okay, thanks, Alyssa. Okay. So initially championed by trade unions, a just transition involves a shift from high carbon activities to a green economy while avoiding harm to workers, communities, and the most vulnerable. It means making sure that no one's left behind. Now, what is your vision for a just transition?
Can I go first?
Yes.
Oh, good. A just transition is the core principle of our Green New Democratic Deal. The transition to a net zero economy has to be equitable and just, and as you have said, Peter, and as people are recognizing, everyone deserves to share in that opportunity and prosperity it brings. When we look historically, though, that's not what we have seen. The concept of a just transition, it has to be justice-based. When we think of First Nations and Indigenous communities that have been under, like, how many boiled water advisories do we have now? The historical injustices have to be rectified. That's a piece of our platform and our commitment. We will clean up the mercury from the English Wabigoon River once and for all. So the grassy narrows and the First Nations in that area can heal. But that is making something wrong right. We have a lot of work ahead of ourselves there. But we will work to address the root causes of inequity. Environmental racism is a very real thing experienced by folks across this province. And they're not sharing in the economic benefit. When we see industry not have to take responsibility, when we've seen this last government in Granville, you almost need to be glad that you haven't sat across from this government. But Doug Ford and the Conservatives have they have gone after the environment with wild abandon. They have gone after it, driven by not even their own greed, but their relationships with donors and folks in the development industry and others who have driven the focus of the government to just run roughshod, do such harm, much of it irreparable. So just transition, as we are looking forward, whether that is working with skilled trades, creating real jobs, good paying jobs, but we can't leave anyone behind. And often, and I come from labor, we talk about what that just transition would look like in the workplace and about construction and infrastructure. But it's the folks beside that construction and infrastructure. It's community members who are always left out and left behind, who are hurting, and that is not what reconciliation is about. That is not what a just transition would look like. So again, we are committed to that true and meaningful reconciliation, and we will do the work in good faith and make careful, concrete steps and take that action to respect treaties. And taking action on climate crisis cannot come at the cost of an affordable life for families or a safe life for folks and families. And that's 3 minutes now. Thank you. Okay.
Feels a lot more comfortable, eh?
And thank you for the question, and I'm going to take issue with one point my colleague or my friend has made about selling off Hydro One. That does not increase pollution. Hydro One, actually, we still own, the public own, you own 51% of Hydro One. Hydro One, if anyone will tell you that it's a more efficiently run company, and efficiency means prices are kept low. And when prices are kept low, that means we don't have to have more gas plants. We don't have to have a lot of other things. So, you know, people can live decently and can pay. It's still hydro rate is still too high, mind you, but if we are going to have clean energy, there's a cost to it, and that cost outweigh the illnesses that occur from pollution, etc. You can, and the cost of hospitalization. So there is benefit, and I think that benefit far outweigh any fiscal problems that we may encounter. And the point is, by doing this, by having clean energy, by getting rid of fossil fuels and getting rid of cars, it doesn't mean people won't have jobs, because they'll be electric. We're just replacing that with electric cars. And part of what is in our platform is the first thing the Ford government did was cancel the rebate on electric cars. We're going to bring that back, and that's to the tune of $13,000. So those are some of the things we are doing, and we have to continue to do that, and we have to do our part, as I said, not just for this generation, but for the next generation to come, for our kids, our grandkids. Make sure that for me, it's always about quality of life. And yes, there may be a monetary cost, but at the end of the day, we want to have a healthy, vibrant community. And we're going to strive to do that. And we have done that when we're in government through windmills, through green energy, which I believe the Ford government has canceled a lot of those contracts. And we are unable to get the data to see how many of those contracts were actually canceled. So we're going to pursue that. We're going to pursue windmills. We're going to get rid of coal gas plants, which I saw today in the paper that our emissions from gas is going to increase like 400% carbon from gas plants. So that's going to happen. We can't have that. We have to fight for clean energy, and that's what part of our platform, and that's what we plan to do.
Thank you.
On day one. Thank you.
Ms. French, do you have a response to that?
Well, I remember the hydro conversation quite differently, and being in that room, I collected folks' hydro bills from across the area, and hydro bills have gone up, as my colleague has reminded us, but the electricity privatization has driven up people's hydro bills. It's more expensive. The agricultural community and farming, that's borne out in the grocery stores, and we see higher prices. Like, it's just all the way along. And those changes also have made it harder for people to convert to cleaner electrical home heating. Like, it's had consequences that are absolutely felt by real folks in our community. So he and I can maybe agree to disagree, but I remember it quite differently.
We have one more opportunity for a response to that. Mr. Anderson, if you want to.
I beg to differ. Why hydro bill actually went up, it used to be heavily subsidized, and the government decided to let the free market determine the price. That was the cause of the increase, not because we divest some of the interest in hydro. And as I said, you can look at the record and you can do your research and find out that it's a much more efficiently run company today than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And those are facts. That's facts. You can do your research, and you'll get those answers.
Thank you. Moving on to our next question. COVID-19 clearly demonstrated that business as usual is not the only option for our work-life balance. How will you and your party take advantage of the opportunity provided by COVID to make changes that could benefit people and the planet?
I don't remember who's first. I think it's you.
I did your turn.
It could be either of you.
Go ahead.
It's question 4, right?
Yes.
Oh, can you repeat that too, please?
Oh, sure. COVID-19 clearly demonstrated that business as usual is not the only option for work-life balance. How will you and your party take advantage of the opportunities provided by COVID to make changes that benefit people and the planet?
I'm happy to go first again.
Sure.
Okay. Well, we've all been living through the pandemic, and it has, I think we've all seen that it has exposed just how broken some of the systems really have become. It also, we have seen that the Doug Ford cuts have made things worse. We have a plan to make sure that we actually learn the lessons from the pandemic, make sure that we make the changes to help Ontarians and the planet. But specifically, the pandemic has also provided an opportunity for folks to, folks and future governments, to take stock of how we do things and dream up and imagine new and better ways of doing them. An NDP government will take the lessons learned over the past 2 years, and specifically, and I've got a bit of a list here to answer, to introduce a new Emergency Management and Civil Protection Act and other pandemic legislation to strengthen our ability to respond to crises. We've had a lot of learning on the fly, but we have learned it. Let's move forward. Create more stability for small businesses by being a transparent and predictable partner, providing timely and proportional service or support that's easy to access. Mandate that all newly built public, residential, and commercial buildings be net zero emissions by 2030, alongside a world-leading building retrofit program, which is, it's actually really exciting. I would invite you guys to delve into that when we have a bit more time. And also to launch a transparent public review of the permit to take water process, especially for bottled water, to protect public use and good watershed management. And you'll have to forgive me for specifically reading, but I want you guys to take away some specifics, and I want to make sure that everyone is inspired to pick up the Green New Democratic Deal and read through it. I'm familiar with it and have been since we brought it out, but it has just become so much more real as we look around our communities and our planet right now and see it's not just it is visionary, but it is something that we can implement now, and when we form government, many pieces that we'll be starting right out the gate in 2022 as we reach for those targets. And from 2 governments ago, I learned the term stretch goal. It's not a stretch goal, folks. We're aiming to achieve, and as I had said, with that estimating it, $40 billion in new investments, but in terms of how we actually make that happen, carbon pricing, green bonds, we've outlined a lot of great pieces. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And yes, the pandemic has brought us to realize a lot of things. How we do business, how we live, we have to change that, and that's something that we are going to do from day one. And right now, we're going to allow folks. I think the pandemic has let us realize that we can work from home and be as productive. That, in fact, take cars off the road again, and so that's less pollution, less gridlock. You don't sit in traffic and consuming fumes from vehicles, etc. And we have to work together to, as I said before, we are in this together. We have to do things that's going to prevent us from being exposed to carbon monoxide, being exposed to greenhouse gas, being exposed to a number of things. And you know what? Climate change is so real, folks, that you look in the news and you see the forest fires, you see the flooding. And we had that right here at home, right down at Cedar Crest Beach in 2017. That was the effect of climate change. We had people flooded out. And they're still preparing for the next wave. And it takes money, it takes time, and it ends up costing more when we could have preventative measures. So as a government, we're doing things, we're learning, and as we evolve, and as we get out of this pandemic, we have to ensure that, first of all, we're well prepared for the next pandemic. and this one probably isn't over. I hope to God it is, but it probably isn't. So we have to make sure that folks can live decently, earn a living wage, and at the same time protect our environment, and it's no cost or nothing out of your pocket to do that. But it takes all of us working collectively to build the economy, to make life more affordable, to make sure we can sustain that standard of life, clean energy, make sure our hospitals are well equipped, make sure our schools are well ventilated. Those are things we learned from the pandemic, that kids probably could have been in the classroom if there were proper ventilation. Make sure we have staff in our long-term care homes. So a lot of those deaths that occur could have been prevented. So these are things we're going to put in place to strengthen those social safety net that people need, like our hospital care, our schools.
Thank you.
And in general, our community. We're going to build more parks.
Thank you, Mr. Edson. You're a little bit over.
Okay, I could go on. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's right. This is our last question before the Q&A section. Just letting you guys know ahead of time. Now, as I said in my introduction, the goal of limiting the global average temperature rise to 1.5 degrees is on life support, and it's our current way of doing things that put it there. Our actions now will define not only the physical climate, but also social inequalities. Our actions can further entrench existing inequalities, as is the case in places like Miami and Jakarta, where climate gentrification means that the wealthy can move out of the danger zone, while the poor are priced out of safe neighborhoods and forced to live in areas vulnerable to things like flooding and sea level rise. This is the type of situation that we risk when we react rather than act proactively. Alternatively, we can shift direction and set a new agenda, choosing to act in a way that helps reduce inequality. This is what can be achieved through things like affordable and effective public transit, energy-efficient homes, and just transition legislation. This is the difference between a reaction and a vision. So my question to you two is, how will you be a visionary?
Can you repeat the last part of that
Yes.
question?
My question to you is, how will you guys be a visionary?
Sorry.
A visionary.
How will we be visionary?
Oh, how we would be visionary. Okay, so we have started to doing that. We started doing that by example, taking cars off the road. That's one example. We're making sure that homes are better built, making sure that the materials we use are environmentally friendly. And as I will expound and what our schools are well ventilated, making sure that as we move forward, we expand rather than contract the green belt. We have to do that. We have to make sure we preserve farmland. It's not visionary to build highways through sensitive, environmentally friendly, protected lands. It's not visionary to reduce our farmland. As you know, the amount of farmland that we have in this country, it's only 5%. We got to protect that, and we got to have that, sustain that food supply. And those are things that's very important to each and every one of us. We have to be cognizant, yes, of housing prices. That also factors in the collective whole to make sure life is better, make sure we have apartment buildings, more intensification in order to preserve land, making sure that within intensification the cost may go up because you're going to need more roads, you're going to need more parks, make sure we expand, and I know it's in our plan to have 5 additional provincial parks so that people have that green space. Make sure the jobs that we create are green jobs, whether it's building electric cars, whether it's building windmills and wind turbines. Those are all going to protect the environment and at the same time preserve jobs. Make sure people dispose of their garbage in an appropriate way, making sure that we're not building any more landfills, making sure when we have anaerobic digesters, it's safe, it's monitored. And those are ways we can constructively do to reduce climate change, to reduce pollution, to make life easy and better for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. French?
Sure, thank you. And you're asking how we can be visionary, but I'm actually going to bring it back to local because we have a lot of folks who live in the Oshawa and Durham region who are quite visionary and quite committed. And so taking my inspiration from them, I was very proud to stand alongside probably some of the folks in this room and online in the fight against Doug Ford and his obsession with MZOs in saving Duffins Creek. Yay team, we all played a real role in that, and that is something that if we ever back down with this particular former premier, we would lose a whole lot of ground or a whole lot of water. And so I think, ensuring that we stay committed to allow municipalities to make the best decisions for growth and not be forced by a heavy hand of MZOs at the developers' behest. I think of Duffins Creek, and then I look to Carruthers Creek and Carruthers Headwaters. That's something that I was very proud to stand beside Andrea Horvath and leaders from Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation and local activists and advocates and just neighbors and folks who want that to be brought under the green belt brought into. So that's a commitment that we have made. I guess that's visionary, but at the same time, it's just what has to happen, right? But it's community-based. And, again, looking to the broader Durham region and the conversations that we're having around urban sprawl, the conversations that we're having around responsible growth. We know that there has to be increased housing supply and whatnot, but for goodness sakes, we've got to have growth that's directed within the existing urban boundaries and hold that line on sprawl. And municipalities should not be strong-armed into, rushing these growth plans, I'll say. So again, it'll be being a government that actually is a partner and recognizes that growth and intensification, it has to be responsible. I look at this former premier and his just blatant disregard for preservation of our green space, of our waterways. Endangered species are far more endangered than they were before the Doug Ford Conservatives. So, the visionary piece is, I think, all of this within the frame of, government to government relationships and concrete planning with First Nations, meaningful reconciliation, but also responsible planning. And it committed to a health in all policies perspective. So no matter which part of the platform you look at, the health of communities, the health of our future in mind and at the fore as we leave no one behind. And that's time again. Gosh,
thank you
goes
very
by
much.
Fast.
As much as I would like to, I don't think we can.
It's just getting warmed up.
I'd love to extend it to like 5 minutes per question, but I think at that point we'd kind of...
Well, then you'd lose your watchers.
Exactly. Okay, so speaking of watchers, we now turn over our questions to the audience. So I believe Trevor is bringing up some written questions. And I apologize, I should have checked this beforehand, but where's the mic for in-person audience questions? Over there. Okay, awesome. So we can have someone walk around if anyone wants to bring that up. And wow, that is long. Okay, so our first audience question. Even if fossil fuel emissions stopped immediately, global food system emissions, approximately 50% of which are from animal agriculture, would still make it impossible to limit warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius. The IPCC has called on wealthy countries to slash their methane emissions and reduce meat consumption. We also have seen this past year that large-scale animal agriculture is not practical due to the extreme weather events that go along with climate change. Would you support shifting subsidies away from animal agriculture and towards climate-friendly, plant-based food options for public institutions that are under provincial jurisdiction? That's pretty in-depth.
Rock, paper, scissors? Will I go?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I don't know which, whether it's on a specific page, and I would like to actually delve into this. I do my best to be plant-based, just on a personal note. And I know that working with the agriculture industry and partners, there's a lot of improvement that can happen in terms of the provincial responsibility. We want to ensure that agriculture is able to, to have what they need to feed our cities and be able to, be supported by government. But at the same time, we all have an important role to play in terms of, you were talking about methane, whether we're talking about, safe and clean water runoff or various pieces. And I think that government has to show leadership in that regard. So I'm not going to pretend to have a specific answer, but I would like to have a better one for you. I know that when we are talking about agriculture, though, we have seen that, like, Ontario's been losing an average of, 175 acres of farmland every day to urban development. So, we're seeing farmland loss threaten Ontario's resilience. We have, when it comes to farming, when it comes to agriculture, there are a lot of pieces that we have to sit up straight and not just take notice of, but take responsibility for. We've seen the highways, like Highway 413, the Bradford bypass, just doing such harm to that farmland. So there are a lot of pieces that I think would reduce, whether it's methane gas, like I take your point that I didn't answer that specifically, but we have to work with agriculture and ensure that they have what they need in terms of investment to be able to make those environmental changes, because there is so much at stake. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with my friend here that it's a very difficult question, and I am not quite a vegan. I am a pescatarian, so I do a lot of plant-based stuff, and we couldn't sit here and say, well, we're going to get rid of, because we still have to protect our farmers, and farming is still a big part of our economy. So sometimes we may want to do that, but we have to be realistic about it as well. So I would support that if it was something that was sustainable, if it was something that farmers could transition into without losing their livelihood or that support. So that's a question that I guess if someone wanted to be a vegetarian or vegan, that's a personal choice. That's something that they would do. But I don't have that as part of our platform. I'm going to be honest. I don't see that. But it's something that I will take back. It's something that we could look at. But I don't have a definitive answer for you at this point. Thank you.
Ms. French?
Are we allowed to do a bit more?
Yes, sure.
Because I'm sitting here thinking, and of course you haven't seen me turning pages, but I will say that, we have a lot, it's very challenging for farmers to stay in farming. We're seeing fewer young people able to continue the family farm and continue being involved. And I think that a provincial food strategy, we do have to strengthen food security. And I think that a part of that, when we look at even just our grocery store shelves and we see different alternatives, if a farm can't transition to their own future, to something that they might want to get into, whether that's different and better farming practices, whether that's shifting what it is that they grow or how they do business, we as a government are going to have to have to not just allow for that, but work with them and have that. If it's a shifting market, then it will need to be shifting supply. And if the farms aren't able to, either because of cost or because they don't have that, broadband support, for example, if they don't have that, we need to ensure that they do. So I know that we are committed to working with our agricultural community, and perhaps that can be a part that answers back to that.
Thank you very much. Yeah, sounds like this is kind of like the under-discussed part of the just transition, that's working on industries. So do we have any more written audience? Oh, we have a we have a mic audience question. Do you guys want to borrow my mic? I've got an extra.
So I'm quite sure you haven't had a chance to develop a policy on this thus far, because it's sort of been a runaway train. But I'd like you to address the question or the problem of spiraling gas prices. So I know the instinct of everybody is to say, the government has to subsidize, we have to reduce taxes, we have to cut back on green taxes. But from my perspective, that's a short-term solution to a long-term problem. We need some flexibility moving forward in how we deliver transportation and how we localize to reduce our transportation costs. Do either one of you have any thoughts on how we can proactively manage the soaring costs of gas without artificially lowering the prices, and instead transitioning to more renewable, localized transportation and resilient local food systems?
You want me? I have a quick answer for you. Switch to an electric vehicle. I know that ideally that would be the best answer for that. I don't know if soaring gas prices will take some of the pollutants off the road. Maybe that's a silver lining, and that may allow people to think outside the box and say, maybe I better look at seeing if I can ride a bike to work, or buy an electric car, or find a different mode of transportation. Soaring gas prices, I often marvel about that, because sometimes it doesn't take much to trigger a price increase, as you know. And I'm saying, why would, say, even a war in some faraway land that doesn't produce oil, why does your gas price increase? So it's one of the, I think a lot of it is market driven, a lot of it is greedy speculators making a profit more than, I think the price could be a lot lower than it currently is. But then again, I said that may allow us to think twice and probably find another mode of transportation. So hopefully that happens. I don't have a quick answer, a magic bullet for you. I do know that if and when we form government, I guess when we form government after June 2nd, we're going to reduce gas price by, I believe, 5 or 6 cents a liter or something, or 5%, I'm not sure, somewhere there. But that's a short-term fix, and as I said, maybe we should transition away from fossil fuels as much as we can.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I know that a lot of so it's been wonderful being a member of the Ontario NDP caucus this past session. We've had some pretty awesome voices from across the province. Some of my colleagues have done a lot of work advocating on behalf of northern members, because as we look across the province, we see the disparity. We see the difference. Like, gas prices are astronomical, and then drive further north, and it's more astronomical. And so in terms of what Ontarians can expect, for it to be so different and so challenging based on where you live, obviously is not right or fair. The getting away from fossil fuels is the direction that we want to go, but not everyone is there, and they won't be there fast enough. And with this past government that ripped out charging stations right out the gate, we've already talked about the rebate, but everyone we talk to, people are starting to eye those electric vehicles, and wonder how on earth they're going to be able to maybe afford it, but also how does it work in terms of the infrastructure, right? So investing in the infrastructure, making sure that can be people's reality when they're ready to make that choice. But until we get there, a lot of folks, a lot of folks rely on the car that they currently have or their mode of transportation now. So yes, ensuring that more folks are able to have great public transit options, investing in green public transit, and choice for people, that's super and all well and good. But the fact of the matter is we're still dealing with the high gas prices. So my answer for you is, in terms of the policy, you started out by saying, I'm sure you don't have one. I'm not sure that I don't, because my colleagues up north who have been advocating and putting things together, bringing forward legislation and passing motions, I wish that I had those at my fingertips right this second. So I'm going to direct you to that, and perhaps I can share some of that with the organizers of this to be made available, because I'd like to give you a more specific answer that I can't grab fast enough. But we'll find you better than what I'm giving you now.
We can definitely look into kind of, if either of you have kind of, oh wait, I forgot about this policy that my party actually has. We can probably figure something out with that. So, with all this talk about not just public transit, but electric cars, there's of course the question of where that electricity comes from. So I'm just wondering, what are your kind of directions that you want to see Ontario's electricity go, especially in regards to where the Ford government is trying to make our electricity supply come from? I can elaborate a bit.
I'm happy to start with that one.
Okay.
Sure.
You want it?
Well, we want to make sure that electricity is affordable for folks, and all of us know what it's like when we can't pay our bills in our homes, if we're lucky enough to have one. For other people, they can't, it's not affordable, and a big part of that is the cost of electricity, even if we don't think of it as such. So for example, as we're knocking on doors, we're talking to folks who are saying, how can you bring down the price of groceries? Well, it's not so much the grocery lever, but it's all of those. There's a lot of pieces to that, but a big part of it is the cost of electricity that then is borne by agriculture, and we see it then in higher prices at the store. All of it's interconnected. So we have to make sure that electricity is affordable, and we have to expand our hydro capacity. Like, if we look around us, we got water, folks, and we have opportunities. And I think that's back to I'm more than sore. I'm more than bitter. I'm still really mad about the sell-off of Hydro One, but we need to expand our hydro capacity, increasing intermittent renewables, whether that's wind or solar, creating more grid scale storage. Everybody has a roof. There are different innovations that are open to us in terms of rooftop solar capacity on buildings. We look to Quebec and Manitoba when we're trying to figure out how we all fit together. And as I have said about conservation, conservation doesn't create energy, but let's stop wasting it, right? Like, let's do things better. When we turn to the brilliant minds of our day, there's a lot that we could be doing better. So I think, as I had said, conservation first is an important part of it. I think that's good for now.
Thank you very much. Do we have any more audience questions at this moment?
You want to answer the?
Right. I'm so sorry.
I could add, electricity price, other than subsidy, which we could subsidize it, but you are still paying for it. It's just it doesn't come on your bill, but it's going to come on some other bill, your taxes, etc. The Ford government did say one of the many promises they made during the last election, that they were going to reduce electricity prices by, I believe, was 12%. That never happened. It actually went up. So, as they have some of the renewable, the don't like windmills, they don't like solar panels. So the answer, maybe one of the answer is, we have excess electricity. We have to develop, in this day and age, we should be able to store electricity, but we still don't have any proper method of storing excessive electricity. So maybe that's something we could look at, and that might drive the prices down. I can't see why we're not able to come up with some kind of innovative way of storing electricity, and we have it there when we need it. When the wind isn't blowing, and we could always rely upon that. So maybe that's something we should look at, or maybe invest in that type of technology.
Awesome, thank you. Alyssa, I see you over there. You've got an audience question? Amazing.
Hi there. So my question for you is, I walk through my grocery store right now, and I still see a lot of big corporations and big companies using single-use plastics, which we've all been trying to get away from. And we see companies like Tim Hortons who are being very forward about the fact that they're making things compostable and recyclable. And then I walk around my store and I see people putting things like oranges and kiwis and lettuce in a plastic bag, which seems remarkably unnecessary. So I just want to know what your party is going to do to hold these big companies and these big corporations responsible, because we as the people are really not in a position of power to hold them accountable for using these single-use plastics when they're as big as they are.
Yeah, I think that's something that I have a counselor and council that believe we should ban all plastic bags, and you would never see him use a plastic bag, and I agree with that. I think we should get rid of single-use plastic. I myself am guilty as well, because I generally use bottled water from a plastic bottle, and it happens I try to deviate from that, but somehow I always end up with a plastic bag. So I guess it takes that discipline to move away from that. So I agree with you that there are other solutions and there are other ways. I know one store where I go, Fresh Cut, they don't have that there anymore, and I believe some of the other grocery stores are transitioning away from single-use plastic bags, and the sooner the better, and I think that's something I would strongly advocate for as a government, and that's something that we should be doing. That's simple enough. I don't think that's overly burdensome to do that. So I support that wholeheartedly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Well, an NDP government I know would lead by example where this is concerned. It's part of a broader, so banning single-use plastics, we will pass a law banning all single-use plastics for non-medical uses by 2024. So that's a commitment in our platform. I know that my colleague from Kingston and the Islands was big on that issue, and we continue with that commitment. But it's part of a broader waste diversion strategy that has to, we have to see it in all parts of our society right now. We need a comprehensive waste diversion strategy for the public sector, connecting with those stakeholders. We need to, the goal would be to make Ontario waste-free. So there's going to be a lot of pieces that have to happen, but it's a massive amount of waste. Our landfills, we can't keep putting things in landfills. That is not an option. We're out of that option, right? But it's not just about politely inviting people to stop using plastic bags or plastic toothbrushes or what have you. We need to make sure that large-scale industrial producers take responsibility for the waste that they produce. So I guess all of these things factored in, being a partner with municipalities, because so much happens at the city level. The province can do its best, but we also need to be that partner that makes it easier for municipalities to do, whether it's the education pieces. And this isn't me downloading responsibility, it's about supporting municipalities that already, want to ensure that they have more livable communities. So, stewardship is a big piece of this, and establishing a producer responsibility model of waste diversion. I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much. Before we go to what is hopefully another audience question, I have one of my own. So Ontario currently has a serious affordable housing shortage, and governments are currently discussing the best way to address this challenge. Mr. Anderson, I'm sure you're talking a lot about Envision Durham nowadays, which is Durham Region's plan on how we're going to deal with an influx of new people. Our population is set to double by 2040, I believe it is. But my question to you is, how do you and your party plan to address this crisis and make sure that everyone can afford a place to live without exacerbating existing social inequities or damaging natural ecosystems?
Well, currently, I believe we have, as part of our platform, to build over 1.5 million new affordable housing over the next, I believe, 5 years. And I know it's a problem at the municipality. I know at the region we have a waiting list for affordable housing of about 1,100. Thing is, when that list is compiled, all the residents, it's from all over. It's not directly from Durham, so we don't know exactly how much are actually our residents. But it's a crisis that we have to tackle as a province and make sure houses are affordable, and we have to force developers to build affordable housing, because what they call affordable housing, it's really a joke. It's a relative term. What's affordable? So we have to tackle that seriously, and it's a serious problem, because we need our young people are giving up hope. They don't have anywhere to live. I knocked on the door today, and a group of girls said they have communal living because they can't find an apartment and they can't find anywhere to live. And I don't know, Jennifer might run into the same problem. We knock on half the doors I knock on, these seems to be renters. I don't know where the owners are, so it seemed to be more a speculative business. I don't know if they're foreign investors or not. So we have to clamp down on that and make sure their houses affordable for our young people, and that they don't give up hope that they'll ever able to buy a house. So that's something we're going to tackle. A part of it too is part of our platform is we have a living wage. Maybe that's not in today's market. You still probably won't be able to buy a home, but somehow it will help, and we all have to do our part to make sure there is affordability for folks to be able to live. And for me, anything I do or I tackle it, it's always about the quality of life for every Ontarians. Every single Ontarian supposed to be able to find housing. To me, it should be a right. You should be able to have somewhere to live decently in your community. That moving to Northern Ontario, not that it's not anything is wrong with Northern Ontario, but you shouldn't have to move away from your family to find affordability. And I'll expound, there's your time. I have folks in, oh, she put that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jennifer.
Okay, there's a lot in that question, and limiting to 3 minutes. Okay.
Good luck.
Well, thank you. And the thing is, we all know this right now, that we have new neighbors around our community that have moved here from Toronto, or they have they've headed east because it's where they could afford or were more able to afford. There are young people in our community, some not so young, that still can't get into a safe place to live that they can afford. So whether that means that they have to head east, or whether that means that they are in precarious housing, renting, or they're still living, at home. We're seeing all sorts of challenges for folks that I don't think we've seen before. I mean, it's always a goal for people to you know, to live where they work or to live closer to home or to be able to choose where they are able to live safely, and more people can't stay in their communities. They can't live where they would want to. And I don't need to explain this to folks. People know how challenging it is. The NDP does recognize, like we acknowledge that there's a need to accelerate the supply of new housing, and we're aiming for at least 1 million and perhaps 1.5 million new market and non-market homes within a decade. But understand that there's a mix there, public, non-profit, co-op. We need a different mix of homes because there's a mix of folks, seeking them. Our plan includes amending outdated planning rules to end exclusionary zoning and legalize missing middle housing, so duplexes or triplexes, townhouses and whatnot, in the communities, like I said, where people want to live. Aligning that growth, though, with planning, with transit planning, promoting pedestrian-friendly, or transit-friendly cities and communities. I mean, all of that needs to kind of be part and parcel. So I'm outlining kind of back to that visionary. I mean, wouldn't we all like to have livable communities that were safe and affordable? But that doesn't happen by accident. And it's been so frustrating dealing with this the Ford government. And it was the Auditor General who recently, talked about how rushed this process has been. He's been forcing municipalities, to restart their planning processes and rush and lock in these plans based on sprawl. So we must see sprawl. When I say must, I'm not saying we should. I'm saying they now have to plan for sprawl because that was the edict, essentially, from the Premier's office. So it's affordable housing, but it also is within boundaries, focusing on intensification, because if you have services there, it becomes more affordable. You're not paying to extend the services out into the middle of random field where it shouldn't be. Oh, red card, sorry, I'll stop.
Thank you very much. Looks like we have some more audience questions. Go ahead.
Hello. So my question is, with each increased goal for temperature rise and extended period to reach these goals, we use our privilege from our geography.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll start over.
Thank you.
So with every increased goal for temperature rise and each extended period to reach these goals, we use our privilege from our geography and from our position as a more developed nation as protection from some of the worst effects of climate change at the expense of climate refugees and nations that are flooding and burning because of our emissions. So my question to you is, will you and your party make decisions for Ontario and for Oshawa with a broader perspective, keeping in mind the impacts of our actions on the country and the globe, and how will you do so?
Excellent question. Thank you.
I didn't quite get all of your questions, sorry. I take the mask off, yeah.
Sure. So will you, and if so, how will you make decisions, your party for Ontario or you for Oshawa, keeping in mind the impacts of our actions on other less developed nations and the globe in general, instead of just for our community and our province?
So I think specifically in mind to the
Oshawa.
broader global impacts and stuff, rather than thinking just about Ontario, thinking more about the global impacts of climate change and our actions.
Mm-hmm. I'm happy to go first. Yeah. But I appreciate your going over that again. I caught most of it.
Yeah.
And what I had been saying earlier, sort of with that, with the equity lens, the Green New Democratic Deal, that's one of the core principles, is working to address the root causes of the inequity, the environmental racism, and using an environmental justice lens for any of our decisions. So whether we're talking about in Ontario or, Oshawa, Durham region, that's that's a part of that story. The broader piece is, leading by example and also ensuring that we are working with other levels of government and cross-provincially. And I think that that's where the leadership has to come in, because we have a lot of work to do, and yes, it's in our backyard, but it also it's around everybody's backyard. And we are dumping, like I had talked about, we're running out of landfill. Well, we're out of landfill. And the dirty little deals that we have all over the place to ship our garbage to folks who don't have a say and have to take it in because it makes us feel better when out of sight, out of mind. And I'm being facetious. I don't mean to be flip, but we don't have a place to put things. So we have to think so far down the road, and we are not. This past 4 years, and just, I've said it before, and I being a bit snarky, but watching Doug Ford and the Conservatives just, run roughshod over, over our environment, but really on purpose. They've done that damage, but there has been no leadership and partnership with other provinces or other jurisdictions, right? So even the municipalities that are wanting to do better have been stymied, have come up against it with this particular, with the last government. And I think when we are talking about the next government, it darn well better be us. We've got a lot of damage to undo. We're this close, and I know the Liberals are excited about getting back in the room, but they're not going to form the government. There aren't enough of them. There's so much at stake. It has to be us. We support a ban on fracking. That's to me, that's pretty basic. But there's a lot that has to happen in terms of leadership. Please check out the Green New Democratic deal to get a sense of that, but how we fit in the broader frame. I'm proud of us, and I'm proud of the work that we will do together with those partners.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with my colleague again. So we are the only party that can defeat Doug Ford. Only Liberals can beat Conservatives. And that's a fact, right, Jennifer? You won't admit it, but you know that.
You guys are running to get your photocopier back. We're running to be government.
So we are the only alternative, and folks know that, and they realize that. And we are the only one that will seriously tackle climate change. We have done that in the past. We have done that by getting rid of coal-fired plants. We have done that by expanding the green belt. We have done that by investing a great deal in green energy, and we'll continue to do that. And it goes beyond Ontario, as you rightly said, and it goes beyond. And Jennifer is correct that we have to get rid of landfills. And right in Clarington, we have an incinerator, which folks are critical of. But when we were in government, one of the things I did was to make sure that they wanted to do testing once a year. I made sure testing was done 4 times a year. And that came up at the region, and they wanted to disband that because each time you test, it's $250,000 for each test. So I said, how can you put a premium on human health? And I believe they have expanded that for another 2 years. But incineration is all over Europe. It's as long as it's monitored and making sure there's no dioxin and furans getting into the environment. And that's where the anaerobic digester comes in, where you separate the kind of stuff that would create dioxin and furan. So when folks are up in arms about anaerobic digestion, they don't understand it. It's a new technology, new enough, and it's something that gets that out of the environment, and it also produces energy. So you can use that as a source of energy as well. So that's twofold. twofold right there. So there's still a lot of work to do, but I think we are on the right track. Thank you.
Ms. French, do you have a response?
I do. You know, it's, again, having sat across from a Liberal government for 4 years and then a Conservative government for 4 years, there weren't too many differences there. You know, it was Bay Street instead of Main Street kind of, you know, folks that they answered to. And so, you know, I guess back to the question about climate refugees or folks, you know, around the globe who are struggling, and we do speak from a position, or we act from a position of significant privilege here, right? Like, we can send our garbage away, like I said, but I think that people who've been excluded in our province, low-income Ontarians, working-class people, women, youth, Black, Indigenous people of color, that they are reflected in our policies, and so I know that I have every faith that would extrapolate to how we handle newcomers to our province who are forced to flee because of climate emergencies, and we have to make sure that when they do arrive, that they are able to live safely and healthfully once they're here. And so I appreciate having extra time because you get to thinking. So, and it's only fair if you would like to add. Anyway.
No, I'll let that go.
Okay, we have another audience question. If you would like to introduce yourself so that everyone knows who you are, that would be cool too.
Yeah, my name is Brian Kelly. Instead of squabbling on the panel about which party is capable of forming a new government and not a Ford or PC government, I want to talk about strategic voting because I think that's the way to get there. I was pleasantly surprised today to see that the current summary of polling as published in the Toronto Star says that the Ford government is 1 seat short of minority government, or let's put it another way, they've got 1 more seat than they need to form a majority government. So all of that we need to do amongst those who want to see a change of government is to ensure that the Ford government does not get a majority. So that, to me, leads to riding by riding, people interested in climate and environmental issues, undertaking strategic voting to vote for the best candidate running in a given riding, non-PC, to ensure that that seat does not go to a Ford government. This only works, of course, if each of the parties agrees that they will not prop up a minority PC government, and I believe that commitment has already been made by your leaders and the leader of the Green Party. So since I'm required to ask a question here, I just want to confirm that each of your leaders have committed to not propping up a Ford minority government, but instead working together in some form of coalition to rule the province.
I will go first, and I guarantee you, I'm not going to speak for my friend here, but I believe it's on record that they would never prop up a Ford government. And why would you do that? That would be detrimental to the people of Ontario, I believe. And Jennifer, I will have to tell you that I am the best shot here. And instead of fighting against me, I think you should work together to get me elected. And I think it should be anybody but Ford. I think if we care about this province, as we say we do, we cannot have another 4 years of this. This 4 years has put us back 20, 30 years in 4 years. So imagine another 4 years, what would happen? We're still recovering, actually, from Mike Harris' government. We still are. The schools, we're still rebuilding our hospitals, and we're not doing fast enough. And you know what? I am always objective, and what happened in our long-term care home should never have happened. And I say it, I am always blunt and honest, and it didn't start with the Ford government brought that to the forefront. We should have fixed that when we were in government, and we didn't. We could have done more. But we learned from that, and it really bothers me. I see a lot of people die needlessly because of underpaid staff, short staff, the improper inspections. And I see my opponent, the Conservative, has the gall to put on a lecture that Ford did a great job of handling the pandemic. So I would say to him, tell that to folks who have lost a loved one, or a friend of somebody that has lost a loved one in a long-term care home. So I agree with you on that. You know what? This is a time when we should be doing that, to be quite honest, and not fighting against each other. Donut attacks ads should be directed at Ford. We don't, and I'll say that, we are not directing anything negative at the NDP, but they do it to us liberals, and I just cannot fathom that, and I cannot imagine why that's so. Maybe Jennifer has an answer why they're doing that, but we shouldn't if we put the people and this province ahead of partisan political gains, to be quite honest, and I'm being honest about that. This is, as I tell people at the door, this is it's a very, very serious election.
Right.
Thank you.
It's Ms. French's turn to respond.
Sure. And I'm glad to actually have this question. In Oshawa, I am the strategic vote.
Agreed.
But I will say that strategic voting as its own, as its own strategy has elected a lot of conservative governments, I think. And so I'm rather partial to voting for an NDP government, and I'm going to be entirely biased and say that I'm looking forward to being a part of a strong NDP government. I don't have my numbers in front of me, but they're out there for us to see just how many ridings the NDP came second in. We are poised, riding to riding. I think as we've been hearing it, there's a path to government that's about 10 seats. And so while folks are and have been kind of this, we're seeing the ads, whether we'd call them attack ads or just the reminder that the ping pong of the back and forth with, liberal, conservative. I would really like a kick at the can to be a strong NDP government, because, what we're putting in the window in terms of our platform and our promises, I would like the chance to be able to deliver on those things. The future can be hopeful. We've heard the slogans, from bad to worse or what have you, but frankly, people would like to look at not just hope in the window, they want to have it. We have an excellent platform. I would encourage people to take a look at it. That is strategic. It is strategic to vote for your future and for hope. And it's, the why can't we all just get along? That serves the Liberals right now, who had, I don't remember, 7 seats. And it's not about squabbling. It's about, if we want to look at it just from a math standpoint, we've had a wickedly strong opposition at Queen's Park. And we are strong, and we are ready to be government. The colleagues that I had worked with, and granted, we're all starting right now. We're all in our ridings making the case for it. But if you look back at the last 4 years, we made a heck of a case to be the next government and a strong cabinet. You wanted you wanted confirmation or commitment that we wouldn't prop up Doug Ford. I am so ready to not have him be in that room. I am telling you that sitting across from that premier in that government and knowing the untold damage, and that's just what we can keep up with, is terrifying. And I'm not only am I not interested in that, I will do my darndest to not let that happen. So in terms of the promises, ours are bold, they are clear, they're achievable. They are what we are hearing from real folks and families, from workers, from all sectors, that this is what is needed. And I'm going to fight like heck to have that happen. And to me, that is strategic to vote for hope and vote for your future.
Thank you. Yeah. Mr. Anderson, do you have a response?
All I would say is that we're the best alternative. And look at the polls, look at the doors I knock on. And, you know, the 2018 election was a one-off. That was an aberration. So you can't look at the results of that and say, well, that, based on that, we're poised to be government. No. That was a different time. Plus, this is a completely different Liberal government, completely. 90% of our candidates, I think it's more than 90%, are new members. They're a dynamic, diverse team from all walks of life with a wealth of experience. We are ready to govern. We have, I will challenge man for man, a member of our team against any other parties and see how they stack up. We have the cream of the crop when it comes to caliber and experienced candidates who are ready to govern now. Mine, Jennifer is a great member, and Jennifer should be re-elected. I was for saying that, but I'll say that because it's anybody but Doug Ford right now for me. And I wish everybody would think that. It's tough out there. I go to doors and I see nurses in tears. I see teachers at their wits' end. And I say to them, you should be out there rather than crying or letting the public know that you represent, that they have loved ones. Seniors will end up in a hospital and there isn't enough nurses to care for them. Or if they're there, they're so overworked and so tired that they won't get the proper quality of care. And the list goes on to our long-term care homes, our retirement homes. So we cannot let this happen. This should never be happening in Ontario. If you care about Ontario, then let's do something about it. I don't know why Doug Ford or people think he is the end all or be it all, or why he is even at 20%. He shouldn't be. He doesn't deserve to be. But hopefully people will. There's still, 3-4 weeks? A little over 3 weeks left. So people, hopefully Ontarians, come to their senses.
You're free to respond.
Oh, I just, when you said polls, you know, it's interesting. As I said, people should vote for hope or what they believe in. I've never won a poll, but I'm seeking my third term. You know, the day before my first election in 2014, there was a poll in the paper and there was an article, and it had me a distant and distant and irrelevant third, and I won decisively. And again in 2018. So, you know, I keep that up on my office wall to remind me that a little perspective goes a long way with the polls, and that it really, you know, what we're hearing at the doors is that people, you know, want to move forward, that they want to have hope, and they want to have a clear platform of that promise ahead of them. And so anyway, just you say polls, and I had a visceral response of, like, we're doing the work and we want to continue, and I do encourage people to vote for what it is that will make life better for their families.
Thank you. Do we have any more audience questions at this point? No? Okay, in that case, I will ask one last question of myself and then give you guys the opportunity to also have any parting remarks, and then we'll wrap it up. So this is a little bit personal to me, this question. So my family, my mom's from Indonesia, my dad's from Australia. Both those places are severely impacted by climate change. Like I mentioned Jakarta earlier, fastest sinking city on the earth, also the capital of Indonesia. And with these kind of climate impacts, that means that there's going to be a lot of people who are displaced, who are forced to become refugees. And unfortunately, what we've seen, in addition to this trend of people being displaced, is a rise in xenophobia and racism. So my question to you is, are you prepared to fight any xenophobia or racism against climate refugees or any refugees that you see in Parliament?
You would like me to go?
I'm happy to
Yeah.
go first. I figured
go-
we were going to
go ahead.
compete for this one.
Go ahead.
I'm happy to start us off. Yes, I've been very very proud to be a part of a caucus at Queen's Park with very clear anti-racism policies. That my colleagues have been tremendous in the work that they have done, but that is a big part of who we are as New Democrats. And as I have said a few times, and I don't want to repeat myself too much, but our core values really are equity, affordability, reconciliation, and the intersections of how those fit together. We want to ensure that whether you live here now or you will live here, whether you are here and with the resources you need to afford your day-to-day, or whether you are fleeing a circumstance and you are needing government support and services, that is part of our values and certainly is reflected in our policies, in our platform, but also in a lot of the proposed legislation that we had brought forward and motions that we had brought forward at Queen's Park. It's a massive question, but I think bringing it right back down to where we started about, not just a just transition, but about justice. Yes, economic justice, environmental justice, but in our communities, we're seeing terrible hate. We're seeing racism, the Islamophobia, anti-Black racism. It is rampant, but it is very. It's a scourge across our communities, and so to not just have government leadership, but to work in partnership with marginalized community groups, with others, to ensure that their voices are a part of the policies. We do need everyone to have a safe and a safe life here, whether they are coming because they've been forced to, or whether they're coming by choice. And I have faith in us as a government in terms of our the social supports and not just the safety net, but the access to education, access to health care, and what it is that folks need. Our mental health care plan, various pieces are going to be relied upon as we're meeting new neighbors who are coming for various reasons. And back to your earlier question about affordable housing. So I've gone in all directions, but bring it back to the social justice and anti-racism work that we've been proud to do and will continue to do.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, and I hope the day would come when you wouldn't have to ask that question, to be quite honest. And I guess that's wishful thinking on my part, but we're a long way from there. There were times when I thought we were closer to achieving that, where racism would not exist, but it's so profound and it's being enabled more and more these days. And as I said, they seem to resonate to certain segments of society and certain political parties as well. That enables that, so, and I'll call it out. I'm not pulling punches. I call it affects us all, irrespective of who you are. That's not the way our society should function. That's not the society we want. That's not the community we want. That's not the province we want. That's not the country we want. But unfortunately, it's here, and it's not something you can legislate away. Like, for instance, in my community and in Jennifer's as well, there are certain flags being flown, and there are community members that speak out, but there's nothing we can do because we say, okay, it's freedom. But if that's how you're going to display freedom, then it's a very, very, very sad omen on all of us. So I think neighbors should call out neighbors who exercise or take part in that and shame them. But we seem to be afraid to do that. So I'll say, why don't you say something? I don't want to disrupt the neighbor. But we all have an obligation to speak out and to be more vocal and to try and say, look, that's not acceptable. And that's never acceptable.
Thank you so much. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, my time is up, I guess.
No, you still got some time left. Sorry, I just
No,
jumped the gun.
that's okay. I'm setting up. I could go on and on infinitum about this. It's okay. Thanks.
Okay, so I think now is the time for our parting remarks, if you have any. We're going to try to limit it to 2 minutes, I think. Yeah, so go ahead.
Okay. Again, you wanted to go, Jennifer?
No,
I
no,
don't
go
want to
ahead.
butt in you. Okay. Again,
See, we're getting along.
Thank you for taking the time out of your busy evening. It's a lovely day to be here. And thanks again to the organizers that put this together. It's wonderful that you're able to do this. And for obvious reasons, I see the governing party candidate is not here. So you can draw your own conclusions from that. I'll say that we have a robust plan to fight climate change. We want to take 400,000 cars off the road. We want to plant over 8 million trees, which is all. I wish Libby Rakanski, I don't know if she's here, she's always, you all know Libby, she's one of the strongest, probably the most vocal environmentalists we have in our community, and I thank her for that every time she comes to council. We want our electricity supply we want to transition away to clean electricity supply. We want to promote electric vehicles. That's why we have the incentive, the programs that up to 13,000 you can get to buy electric cars. We want to cut emissions by 50% by 2030 and probably beyond that, and that's achievable. That's not an unrealistic goal. And we want to have zero emission by 2050. I believe, Jennifer, we have that in common, at least with the NDP, if nothing else. And we have a track record of fighting climate change, and we will continue to do that. We will try and expand the green belt, the Oak Ridges Moraine, and we will do whatever we can to make sure that the planet, we can do a little bit, make sure that the planet is on the right track. So again, you have our pledge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. French?
Thank you, and I would like to, if I didn't say it earlier, I'd like to really thank the organizers for putting this on. A big part of a provincial election is the community and personal piece, and as we are knocking on doors, we're having very, very important conversations with folks, and it's extremely personal, this election. People are realizing just how government affects their lives, whether it's access to health care, whether it's the river that used to be there isn't, whether it is, the traffic on the roads, or whether they can afford post-secondary education, whether their aging loved ones are safe and secure, can afford to have a place to live. All of these things, it matters who's in government. And as we're here focused on, a healthier future, and yes, this is, climate justice, Durham with a focus on climate, I have appreciated the questions and the intersections that make us all remember it is all interconnected, and you can't have one without the other, so to speak. I'm glad to be here, and I hope to be able to continue to do the work as a member of provincial parliament in Oshawa. I'm actually hoping to have a lot more help when I head back, to not just be the little orange dot in a sea of blue or the little orange dot in a sea of red. I would like us to be able to form that strong, hopeful government that is committed, that is strong and is ready and is committed to healthier communities you know, if we built our environmental policies by respecting indigenous knowledge and the traditional ecological knowledge, if we built our environmental policies, you know, alongside those who are left out of the decisions to ensure that, you know, the people who live near construction and industry or what have you are able to be safe and healthy and well, imagine that future. This is an unprecedented global challenge, and yet with it, there are opportunities to shift gears, revitalize, you know, our communities. There's some real opportunity here, and it isn't going to happen when we have folks with the head in their with their heads in the sand, but also, you know, beholden to private corporate interests. So I'm glad to be here and do this together with folks. So thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you so much. To wrap up, I'd like to extend a special thank you to Hope Fellowship Church for the use of this facility, and to Chris and Skylar, and also Trevor back there working all the tech. Thank you so much, guys. And thank you so much to both of you. Like, your answers today, it's just more hope. Thank you so much. And thank you all to the audience, everyone who came in person, everyone who's tuning in online. You know, seeing you all here is living proof that our communities do care about climate action. The situation is dire, and it is easy for individuals to feel overwhelmed. But when we join up with others, we become so much more powerful. Tonight also reaffirms the importance of participating in the democratic process. By voting, you can help make sure that we use our energy to work with the people who hold public office instead of having to fight them. We can choose people who will allow us to have constructive collaboration rather than destructive confrontation. As for us, you can follow Climate Justice Durham on Twitter at Durham_climate, on Instagram at Climate Justice Durham, and on our Facebook page and YouTube channel, both called Climate Justice Durham. We post all of our events on those platforms. If you want to contact us directly, you can also direct message those accounts or contact us via our email, which is climatejusticedurham@gmail.com. Now we have 3 more debates coming up in Ajax, Whitby, and Pickering-Uxbridge. For those, for information on those, you can go to the aforementioned social media page. Now that concludes our climate debate. Again, thank you all so much for coming, and I hope you have a great night.